Disclaimer: the story is a work of creative nonfiction based on real-life events. While some details and characters may be dramatized for narrative effect, the events depicted aim to reflect genuine human experiences of betrayal, trust, and emotional turmoil. Life had always seemed ordinary, the kind of normal that lulled you into a comfortable rhythm without ever demanding too much thought. Mornings were predictable. The sound of the coffee machine, the familiar aroma drifting through the apartment, and the gentle hum of quiet conversation over breakfast. Weekdays blurred into one another with work, errands, and the occasional dinner out. From the outside, it appeared perfect, a relationship built on trust, understanding, and what seemed like effortless harmony. My partner was attentive, considerate, and remarkably consistent, the kind of person who made life feel safe and uncomplicated. There were no glaring red flags, no immediate reasons for suspicion, and yet, the smallest inconsistencies began to plant seeds of unease. At first, they were subtle: a phone left face down on the counter when it used to lie openly, a slight hesitation before answering certain calls, or a passing comment that seemed slightly off, as though rehearsed. I brushed it off, attributing it to stress from work or just the occasional lapse of memory. Still, a quiet, nagging thought began to creep in at the edges of my mind, a feeling I could neither fully articulate nor ignore. Trust had been the foundation of our bond, yet suddenly it felt fragile, like fine glass teetering on the edge of a table. I found myself replaying interactions, scrutinizing body language, and noting discrepancies that hadn't mattered before. Despite the unease, life carried on. Laughter still filled the rooms, conversations flowed, and the routines of love, the morning greetings, the shared meals, the late-night whispers remained intact. There was no reason, or so I told myself, to suspect betrayal. The world outside our apartment, with its chaos and unpredictability, seemed miles away from the calm bubble of our relationship. Friends would compliment the apparent strength of our bond, remarking on how compatible we were, how easy it was to be around us. To them, our life was enviable, a picture-perfect couple in a world that often seemed frayed at the edges. But the cracks, though invisible to outsiders, were beginning to form. The perfect facade, built over years of shared experiences and unspoken understanding, was starting to show the faintest signs of strain. The unease in my chest grew in intensity, shifting from a whisper of doubt to a persistent thrum of suspicion. Questions, once easily dismissed, now demanded attention. Why did they seem distant at times? Why were certain conversations avoided or deflected? And most importantly, why did my gut insist that something was not right, despite all evidence to the contrary? In those early days, the tension was almost imperceptible, like the quiet hum before a storm. I clung to the hope that I was imagining things, that trust would prevail, and that the life we had built together was safe from disruption. Yet, even as I attempted to convince myself, I couldn't shake the sense that beneath the calm surface, a force far bigger, stronger, and more unpredictable than I could comprehend was quietly waiting to reveal itself. Little did I know, that moment was only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the truth hiding behind a perfectly maintained facade. It started with a tiny detail, almost laughably insignificant at first, a message notification that popped up and vanished too quickly for me to read. I told myself it was nothing, that curiosity was merely prying where it shouldn't. But something in the way my partner reacted, the brief flicker of discomfort in their eyes, made the rational part of me pause. It wasn't the kind of mistake someone makes by accident, or at least, that was the thought that clung stubbornly to my mind. That evening, I found myself replaying the day's interactions, noticing subtleties I hadn't paid attention to before, the slight hesitation before speaking, the tone of voice that sounded rehearsed, the carefully measured laughter that didn't quite reach the eyes. My gut churned uneasily, insisting that I was seeing a pattern forming out of nothing, but patterns, I had learned, often reveal the truths we desperately hope don't exist. The following days intensified the feeling. Random absences became more frequent, calls were answered with curt replies, and explanations that once sounded plausible now rang hollow. I found myself checking, analyzing, and sometimes overthinking every gesture and word. Each time my partner left the room with their phone in hand, I caught myself wondering who they were talking to, what they were hiding. The innocence of the past seemed to recede, replaced by an unsettling awareness that someone I thought I knew completely might not be entirely truthful. Suspicion grew like a shadow at the edge of the room, always present but never fully revealed. Internal conflict became the dominant force in my mind. Part of me wanted to confront the situation head-on, to demand answers and demand honesty, while another part begged for patience, for reassurance that I was simply being paranoid. I oscillated between these extremes, analyzing the smallest cues, a whispered conversation, a hidden glance at the phone, or a sudden change in mood. Friends' reassurances only partially calmed me. "You're overthinking," they said. But overthinking didn't explain the knot in my stomach that tightened every time my partner received a call and walked away, or the fleeting discomfort that clouded their expression when certain topics were mentioned. And then there was the unspoken truth. No one notices the small details until the cracks start to matter. The first suspicion isn't always an obvious event or a shocking revelation. It's a quiet, gnawing sense that something isn't right, a tiny seed of doubt that refuses to die. I began keeping a mental log, cataloging instances that now felt suspicious in retrospect. Every minor inconsistency gained weight, forming a silent narrative that my mind refused to ignore. By the end of that week, what started as a whisper had grown into a steady hum of unease. Even as I tried to convince myself that I was imagining things, that love was stronger than doubt, I couldn't escape the feeling that my reality was shifting. The picture-perfect life I had known was beginning to fracture, and beneath the surface of ordinary days, something larger, more complicated, more painful was waiting. The first suspicion, I realized, wasn't just a warning. It was the doorway into a truth far bigger and stronger than I could have imagined. Once the suspicion took root, it became impossible to ignore. Every interaction, every small gesture, felt loaded with potential meaning. I started noticing patterns I had once overlooked, the way my partner's phone buzzed too often in the evenings, the subtle defensiveness when I asked seemingly innocent questions, the unexplained detours during routine errands. Each detail was a puzzle piece, and my mind, fueled by a mixture of curiosity and dread, couldn't stop trying to fit them together. What began as quiet observation quickly escalated into active investigation. I felt a strange duality. Part of me wanted to confront the truth, yet another part feared it might be worse than I could bear. I began documenting everything, keeping mental and physical notes of suspicious occurrences. Late-night texts with unknown senders, unexplained social media interactions, sudden absences, all were cataloged meticulously. I traced routes, monitored timelines, and occasionally found myself scanning phones surreptitiously, trying to catch a glimpse of evidence that would either confirm or dispel my growing fears. Each discovery, no matter how small, acted as fuel for a fire I both wanted and feared to see fully ignite. The thrill of uncovering the unknown mixed with the heavy weight of potential heartbreak, creating a tension that was both exhausting and addictive. As the investigation deepened, I noticed behavioral shifts that were subtle but undeniable. My partner became more guarded, their once casual habits now tinged with secrecy. I began questioning every coincidence, the sudden need to leave the room when a message arrived, the careful phrasing of everyday statements, even the unusual attentiveness to details that never mattered before. The more I observed, the clearer it became that my initial suspicion was not unfounded. The small inconsistencies had grown into a mosaic of deception, intricate and deliberate, yet imperfect enough to be pieced together by someone paying close attention. Emotionally, this phase was draining. Obsessive thoughts clashed with moral considerations. Should I confront my partner directly or continue gathering evidence? How much trust could I afford to maintain while my doubts festered? Each day brought new discoveries, some innocuous, but many that confirmed the growing shadow over our relationship. Friends and confidants offered advice, but ultimately, the hunt for truth was mine alone. I realized that uncovering the reality required patience, careful observation, and a willingness to face outcomes I wasn't sure I could handle. By the end of this period, the unease that had begun with subtle suspicion transformed into a tense, almost palpable awareness that something far bigger was unfolding. The hunt for truth had become a defining obsession, and with every hidden message uncovered and every evasive answer analyzed, I understood that the situation was far more complicated and emotionally devastating than I had ever imagined. I stood on the precipice of revelation, acutely aware that the next steps would either shatter the carefully constructed facade of our life or confirm the worst fears my heart had been trying to ignore. The bigger, stronger reality waiting to be revealed loomed just beyond the horizon, and there was no turning back. After days of careful observation, note-taking, and mounting suspicion, the weight of what I had discovered became almost unbearable. Each small piece of evidence, each fleeting inconsistency, had accumulated into a nearly undeniable narrative. I knew that I could no longer ignore the truth, yet the thought of confronting my partner filled me with equal parts dread and determination. The mind teeters in moments like these, caught between the need for resolution and the fear of destruction. I replayed every potential scenario, every possible reaction, trying to predict the outcome of asking the questions I knew demanded answers. The anticipation was suffocating, a quiet storm building in the heart of our home. Every interaction grew charged with tension. Simple conversations became minefields. Every word, gesture, or hesitation seemed loaded with hidden meaning. I noticed the subtle ways my partner avoided eye contact, the way their body stiffened when certain topics were mentioned, or how their laughter sometimes carried a brittle edge. The realization dawned that the confrontation I feared was inevitable, and yet, knowing it was coming only amplified the anxiety. Nights became restless, filled with imagined scenarios of confession, denial, anger, or heartbreak. Each possibility played over and over in my mind like a looping film, each frame more vivid than the last. I also wrestled with my own emotions, anger, betrayal, confusion, and fear mingled with an unwilling desire to maintain some semblance of control. Could I confront them calmly, without letting rage or despair dictate the interaction? Or would the truth, once revealed, sweep both of us into an emotional whirlwind we could not contain? The moral dilemma was relentless. Should I demand the truth immediately, risk an explosive confrontation, or gather the final pieces of evidence to confront them with certainty? Every choice felt fraught with consequences, and yet indecision was no longer a shield. I knew that delaying the confrontation would only prolong the inevitable pain. Small encounters became symbolic battlefields. A lingering touch, a casual remark, or a fleeting smile carried disproportionate weight, each one a signal in the silent dialogue of suspicion. I found myself constantly analyzing these moments, searching for cracks, searching for truth. At times, I caught glimpses of vulnerability, the briefest hints that my partner was aware of my growing wariness. And yet, those moments were fleeting, overshadowed by the pervasive sense that something larger, more complex, and far more emotionally potent than I had imagined was unfolding. By the end of this period, the confrontation was no longer a question of if, but when. The suspense of anticipation hung over every interaction, every glance, every conversation. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, staring into a void of unknown outcomes. The truth waiting to be revealed was bigger than any simple infidelity I had imagined. It was stronger than any betrayal I had faced before, and its implications threatened to change everything I believed about love, trust, and human nature. The next steps, though terrifying, promised to lift the veil, exposing realities that would forever alter the world I thought I knew. When the moment of revelation finally arrived, it hit with the force of a tidal wave, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. The evidence I had been gathering, the observations I had catalogued, and the nagging suspicions that had haunted me for weeks all converged into one undeniable reality. It was bigger than I could have ever imagined, stronger than my worst fears, and far beyond anything I had mentally prepared myself for. The truth was not just a single act of betrayal, but a pattern, complex, deliberate, and profoundly personal. I felt my chest tighten as the weight of understanding pressed down, each heartbeat echoing with disbelief and heartbreak. The nature of the infidelity was staggering in its scope. It wasn't merely physical. It encompassed secrecy, manipulation, and emotional deception on a level that left me questioning every memory, every gesture, every moment we had shared. Small lies, casual omissions, and careful misdirections revealed themselves as integral threads in a much larger tapestry of betrayal. I remembered conversations that had seemed innocuous at the time, realizing now how subtly they had been designed to mislead. The depth of the deception made it clear that this was not a fleeting mistake or a lapse in judgment. It was a carefully constructed reality, one I had been navigating unknowingly for months. Emotionally, the impact was crushing. Waves of anger, disbelief, sadness, and a deep sense of loss washed over me, each emotion more intense than the last. The sense of betrayal went beyond the physical acts. It was the violation of trust, the destruction of intimacy, and the manipulation of my perception of reality that hurt the most. I felt a visceral mix of grief and fury, as if the very foundation of my life had been shaken. Friends and family became peripheral, unable to fully grasp the magnitude of the revelation, and yet their concern reminded me of the reality that life outside this betrayal continued. Amid the chaos of emotions, I also confronted the stark reality of human complexity. People are capable of choices that defy logic, morality, and expectation, and sometimes those choices are cloaked in the ordinary, hidden beneath everyday interactions. The person I had loved and trusted had become an enigma, their motives and actions now a puzzle I struggled to comprehend. Yet understanding was only part of the process. The emotional reckoning, the acknowledgement that life as I knew it had shifted irrevocably, was far more painful. By the end of the revelation, I realized that this was not just a personal crisis, it was a transformation. The bigger, stronger truth had altered my perception of love, trust, and human behavior. It forced me to confront uncomfortable realities about vulnerability, the illusions we maintain in relationships, and the strength required to face such profound betrayal. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with questions that had no immediate answers, but one thing was undeniable: life had changed, and the path forward would demand resilience, introspection, and an unwavering determination to navigate the aftermath of a truth that was far beyond anything I had ever imagined. The days following the revelation felt surreal, as if I had stepped into a parallel reality where everything familiar had shifted. The initial shock lingered like a dense fog, clouding my thoughts and making even simple decisions feel monumental. Everyday life continued around me: emails, chores, errands, but the weight of betrayal transformed mundane moments into exercises in endurance. I found myself replaying the discovery over and over, analyzing every detail, every subtle cue I had once ignored, and wondering how I had missed the signs for so long. The emotional aftermath was relentless, oscillating between anger, grief, confusion, and a raw, aching sadness that seemed to permeate every fiber of my being. Interactions with my partner became fraught with tension and unspoken hostility. Words felt loaded with unintentional significance, and every gesture was scrutinized for hidden meanings. The relationship, once a source of comfort and stability, had become a minefield, and trust, the foundation of everything, was fractured beyond easy repair. Even casual conversations were tinged with suspicion and guardedness. I began to see how betrayal seeps into the corners of life that were previously untouched, changing perceptions, assumptions, and the very way one experiences connection. The smallest acts, once innocent, now carried shadows of doubt and caution. Family and friends noticed the change, offering support, advice, or simply a listening ear. While their presence was comforting, it also highlighted the isolation that accompanies betrayal. Sharing the truth with others was both cathartic and painful, as each retelling forced me to relive the heartbreak. Some offered practical guidance, suggestions for confrontation, steps to protect myself emotionally, or ways to rebuild trust, while others provided silent support, allowing me to process at my own pace. Their reactions reminded me that betrayal is never experienced in a vacuum. It ripples outward, affecting everyone within the circle of intimacy. During this period, I also grappled with self-doubt. Questions plagued me relentlessly. Had I misread situations? Could I have prevented this? Was I partially to blame? While logically I knew that betrayal is the choice of the betrayer, emotionally it was difficult to separate personal responsibility from the impact of someone else's actions. Nights were the hardest when silence magnified every worry and fear. I wrestled with feelings of inadequacy, vulnerability, and the stark realization that life could be profoundly altered in ways I had never imagined. Yet, amid the turmoil, a faint sense of resilience began to emerge. Accepting reality, painful as it was, allowed me to begin processing the experience. Understanding that life would not simply return to the way it had been forced me to consider the next steps, whether to confront fully, to seek closure, or to begin the process of moving on. The fallout of infidelity is more than a singular event. It is an enduring emotional upheaval that tests the limits of patience, introspection, and strength. I understood, perhaps for the first time, the magnitude of what trust really means and how deeply its violation can affect the human spirit. In the weeks and months following the revelation, I began the difficult process of reflection, attempting to make sense of what had happened and how it had changed me. Initially, it felt impossible to separate the emotions from the lessons, to see beyond the raw pain and anger that dominated each thought. But as time passed, a quieter, more contemplative perspective began to emerge. I started analyzing the relationship not just in terms of betrayal, but as a complex interplay of human desires, choices, and vulnerabilities. The infidelity had revealed flaws not only in my partner, but also in the assumptions and expectations I had carried for years. It became clear that trust, while foundational, is also fragile, and that awareness and vigilance are essential in any intimate bond. Reflection also brought a deeper understanding of my own emotional responses. I realized that grief and anger, though overwhelming, were part of a necessary process of emotional recalibration. I allowed myself to feel fully, without judgment, acknowledging the hurt and disappointment as valid and inevitable. Journaling became a lifeline, a way to organize thoughts, track emotional patterns, and gradually reclaim a sense of control. Therapy and conversations with trusted friends provided additional support, helping me to contextualize the betrayal and to separate my identity from the actions of another. Slowly, I began to reclaim the autonomy that betrayal had threatened to strip away. At the same time, I reflected on the lessons about human behavior and relationships. People are capable of choices that defy expectation, yet those choices do not diminish the validity of one's own emotions or the importance of self-respect. Understanding the complexity of infidelity helped me shift from a place of blame to a place of insight, recognizing the limitations of human judgment and the unpredictability of desire. While this did not excuse the betrayal, it provided perspective, allowing me to process the situation with a clearer, calmer mindset. I began to see the relationship as a story of growth rather than just loss, an experience that, though painful, had sharpened my emotional awareness and resilience. Closure did not come all at once. It arrived gradually, in moments of quiet clarity. It was found in accepting that some questions would remain unanswered, that some wounds would leave permanent marks, and that moving forward required letting go of the need for perfect resolution. I began to forgive, not necessarily the actions of my partner, but the unpredictability of life and human imperfection. This forgiveness was not weakness, but a conscious decision to reclaim emotional energy and focus on personal growth. I realized that closure is not about erasing the past, but about learning to live with it, carrying forward the lessons without letting them define or consume the present. By the end of this reflective process, I felt a renewed sense of self. The experience, though devastating, had revealed my capacity for resilience, introspection, and emotional intelligence. I recognized that trust, once broken, could never be naively restored, but that the ability to love and connect remained intact. Reflection and closure became a roadmap for the future, guiding decisions, relationships, and self-awareness. And while the pain of betrayal would never fully disappear, it had been transformed into a source of insight, strength, and a clearer understanding of what it means to navigate the complexities of human relationships. In the quiet aftermath of betrayal, when the initial shock had subsided and reflection had taken root, I began to truly grasp the magnitude of what had occurred. The experience was bigger, stronger, and far beyond anything I had ever imagined, not merely in its emotional intensity, but in the lessons it carried and the clarity it forced upon me. Infidelity is not just an act, it is a catalyst that reshapes perspectives, challenges assumptions, and redefines the boundaries of trust and vulnerability. The truth had been more powerful than I anticipated, and the process of confronting it revealed depths of resilience and awareness that I might never have discovered otherwise. Looking back, I understood that the impact extended far beyond the relationship itself. It reshaped my understanding of human behavior, of love, and of the delicate balance between trust and skepticism. I learned that deception, no matter how carefully concealed, leaves traces that a discerning eye can detect, and that intuition is a force often undervalued until circumstances demand its attention. Yet, more importantly, I recognized the importance of self-preservation and emotional honesty. Trust, while vital, must be balanced with mindfulness, awareness, and the courage to confront uncomfortable realities. The experience also highlighted the complexity of forgiveness and closure. True closure does not erase pain. It acknowledges it, processes it, and integrates it into the broader narrative of personal growth. It is a conscious choice to reclaim agency, to move forward without being defined by the betrayal. In accepting the full scope of what had happened, I found a form of liberation, the ability to live without the constant weight of suspicion or the endless replaying of past transgressions. Closure became less about the other person and more about reclaiming my own emotional and mental equilibrium. Beyond the immediate pain and upheaval, the journey revealed a surprising depth of personal strength. Facing the unimaginable, confronting deception, and navigating the resulting chaos demanded courage, resilience, and reflection. I discovered an inner capacity to endure, to analyze, and to grow from adversity. The experience, though profoundly painful, became a defining moment, shaping my understanding of relationships, trust, and the human capacity for both betrayal and recovery. It served as a reminder that, even in moments of devastation, there is opportunity for insight, transformation, and the reassertion of self-worth. Ultimately, the story of betrayal is not merely a chronicle of loss, but a testament to the complexity of human emotion and the resilience required to navigate it. The truth was bigger than I expected, stronger than I could have imagined, and the consequences stretched far beyond the immediate heartbreak. Yet, from this experience emerged clarity, strength, and a renewed understanding of life's unpredictable nature. Moving forward, I carry these lessons as both a shield and a compass, aware of the fragility of trust, the importance of intuition, and the extraordinary capacity of the human heart to heal, adapt, and ultimately thrive, even in the face of betrayal beyond anything expected. 7.